How have you worked on making your brand Sarah Victory to now being a
The
larger
Victory
Victory
Company.
company?
The Victory Company. Yeah, it is very interesting because some of it was very intentional, and I'm quite proud of that. And some of that was completely by accident. And I'm also proud of that too, because I was smart enough to know, okay, this is really helpful.
Right. Hi, this is Sue Kirshner with Brand Strong Marketing, and I am so excited about my guest today on Turbo Branding. As always, we're going to be talking about how to ignite your growth by leveraging the brand to grow faster, easier, and more successfully. But first, let me introduce you to Sarah Victory. She is an amazing businesswoman who has built a successful business for herself and for others. And she drops so much knowledge every time she talks that I'm excited that she's here to do that today. But as CEO of the Victory Company and international best-selling author, Sarah Victory has spoken to over 3,000 distinguished audiences, including 3.5 million people in Europe, the US, and South America. She's sought after for popular podcasts, TV, and radio shows, which is why I am thrilled she's here today on Turbo Branding. And she is also the author of Double Your Business in 1 Year or Less and Do Something Brave Every Day. So welcome, Sarah. Is there anything you would like to add to that introduction?
That was wonderful. Thank you. I'm taking you everywhere I go from now on. That was
That's
lovely.
right.
Thank you
I'll be
so
your
much.
personal announcer.
Very nice. Yes. Every time I go anywhere, thank you so much. That was very kind. Thank you.
Perfect,
Yes.
perfect, perfect. So
You don't realize how much you've done until somebody gives you a big introduction like that. So
I
thanks.
know.
Yeah.
Well, I can't wait for Sarah to share her branding journey and insights with us today. So let's jump right in. So, Sarah, every time I talk with you, you're in a different country helping different companies grow.
I know,
Um,
weird.
yeah, and as someone who has lived and worked overseas as well, I want to start
Mhm.
with please tell us, how did you end up speaking and working in Europe? What journey took you there?
It is a crazy journey that has brought me here for sure. I had always done mainly all of my speaking and consulting had always been in the United States, but I did this one program a few years ago, and it was for a very large group of mainly a lot of startups and small businesses. We tend to work with businesses that are between 3 to 5 million and 50 million, but this was definitely on the smaller end. So I'm doing my Double Your Business in 1 Year or Less program that I've done 3,000 times for 3.5 million participants all over the world, and I'm all proud of myself and everything. And this woman walks up to me, and she's a gazelle. She's like 9 feet tall. She's slim. She's beautiful. She opens her mouth, and she has a lovely British accent. I'm like, good Lord, who are you? You're fabulous. And she said, well, she said, I would love if you would sign my book, please. And I said, I would be honored. You seem wonderful. And just big, beautiful smile. And so I'm signing away. And she said, I'd love to double my business this year. And I said, you would? Well, we should talk. And so she says, let's go have tea. And, I don't drink coffee. I only drink tea. So I'm ecstatic when anybody offers me tea. And being a Brit, we were lots of tea. And so we were sitting there, and she starts telling me about her business. And she says, I really want to double it. I say, that's great. And I'm assuming she's a startup or a small business. And then she starts telling me about this division in Ireland and this thing in Scotland and this and overseas. And I'm like, how big is this business of yours exactly? Just fill me in here. And she says, well, in American dollars, roughly 75 million. And I went, oh, back the train up. This is a very different conversation than what I thought. And I said, okay, well, that's a big, ambitious goal to double that. And she said, well, I'm kidding. She said, if I doubled it in 5 years, I'd be thrilled. And I said, well, I'd be thrilled for you. And so I said, okay, so doubling, that's going to be substantial. And I said, well, how have you grown so far? I mean, 75 million is a lot. And she had grown all through acquisition, buying other smaller companies and all through acquisition. And what I found out was that they were great at that, and they were great at infrastructure, because now our company, I've gotten smart. My girlfriend always says I can double anything, I can grow anything except a house plant. And she's right. But the problem with being able to double a business usually in less than a year, or, grow anything, is that you can implode it if it doesn't have an infrastructure under it.
Right.
That's really, really, really good.
Yeah.
And so now we send people in to see how the infrastructure is. And then sometimes we will bring in like virtual assistants or fractional people. We have fractional CEOs and CFOs and EIOs and everything that we can bring into companies and stuff to make sure that they have HR, whatever it is that they need to
Yeah.
be able to take on that much growth. And she was the only company I've ever dealt with where they were like 99% flawless. I mean, they were ready to go. They had spent years. Their superpower was having an infrastructure that was ready. And so I think we brought them in like a few VAs and that was it. And then I said, okay, well, what do you think would help you double? Because when you don't know what to do as a consultant, you ask the client and that they usually know the answer. And then you just have to figure out how to actually make it happen.
Right.
And so I was stuck, very stuck. And she said, oh, I know exactly what we need to do. I said, what? And she said, if we could get into Coke and Pepsi and Quaker, Coke, Pepsi, and Quaker in American, she said we would double like instantly. Like, a few weeks later, we would be double. And I went, oh, that's good. I said, well, why didn't you just do that? What do you need me for? And I think she Velcroed her wrist to her forehead and went on for like 35 minutes about it's impossible. We've tried everything. It's so difficult. And I wanted to say, are you done yet? But, I let her
Right.
vent because these things are hard and they are really hard. And it's hard, I think even brain surgeons don't get to do their own brain surgery. Sometimes things that are obvious to us outside people just aren't obvious on the inside. And for me as well, we have great consultants
Sure.
ourselves.
Hard to look at yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't see what's great about your own company. You can't. You
Right.
just can't. So I said, okay, breathe. And I said, all right, well, what have you been doing thus far exactly that's made this such a frustrating process? And their process consisted of 5,000 different ways to stuff things at those three companies that all said, we're awesome and you should bring us in because we're just that awesome.
Mhm.
Shockingly, that wasn't working so well. So we came up with a whole bunch of interesting strategies that we were able to fiddle with to a point where we got them into Coke in 8 months. We got them into Pepsi in about 14 months. And then Quaker was 2 years and 2 months. So much better than the
Okay.
5-year goal. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they went in like 6.5 weeks later, they went to 156 million. So
Wow.
we were able to have a really, 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 they worked super, super hard. I saw such growth in everybody. And so they were able to go to 156. We had a big party, which was wonderful. So I
Yeah.
think they don't need me anymore. My job here is done. So I go back
Right.
to my little condo in Chicago overlooking the lake and I get a call. I'm going to be in Chicago. So we sit down, we have some lunch, we're chatting, and she says very quietly and conspiratorially, I want to do it again. And I said,
Yeah.
what do you want to do again? Order the Cobb salad? And she
Yeah.
goes, no, 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 no. She said she wanted to double again. And I thought, oh my Lord, what am I getting myself into? And I said,
Yeah.
okay, where do you need me? And because there was going to be more acquiring to be done and more growth to be done and more selling and more salespeople and people to be hired and more VAs from overseas and just
Right.
more of everything. And so, yeah, so she sent me off to Mexico for 8 months. I was in Portugal, I was in France, I was in Spain, and then I was in England, back in the US. And now I'm in the country of Malta, which I had to look up on a map. It is just an hour. It's beautiful. If I'd known how great it was, I would have come a long time ago. About an
Yeah.
hour south of Sicily. So we're doing a lot of really great things. It's growing really, really steadily and it's wonderful. She has introduced us to a whole bunch of other clients, and thus we've really been able to grow pretty substantially. So it went from me a few years ago being this speaker on stage all the time and
Right.
consultant that worked with a few projects one-on-one to us bringing in all sorts, really trying hard, and I think starting to succeed at being one-stop shopping for companies, typically smaller than hers is.
Sure.
But so whatever it is that they need in terms of all of those things, whether it be social media or whether it's, launching various initiatives or lead generation or all those things, having people in-house, having access to certain people and having consultants that we can bring in to be able to make a company as successful as humanly possible.
Yeah.
Over the years, I just had so many people that would say, we need staff or we need this, and I didn't have a solution. And to be able to always have a solution to pretty much everything, or know someone like you who could come in and do branding or something,
Right.
that has been really magical and allowed us to grow and to become more useful to the clients that we work with. But thus, I am in the country of Malta.
Right. Well, that's interesting. And before I jump into the next question, I want to back up a second and say, so when you helped
Sure.
them initially double their
Yes,
business by getting into Pepsi and Quaker and
and
Coca-Cola,
Coke.
what did that look like? What did you actually do for them? Was it making connections because you're super connected, or was it helping
I have a big network.
yeah, or was it
Yeah.
helping to just clarify their offering, or was it bringing in more, like you said, infrastructure, salespeople, someone who would help get them in the door with these organizations?
You're really smart. Yes, yes, and yes. You are the first person to guess all of that. Absolutely. No, I mean, you know how that you do
Yeah,
this too, so you know how this stuff works. Yeah, it really came down to how do we get them the sales power that they need? How do we get them additional infrastructure? Wasn't not much was needed there. They really had most of that done. And a lot of it came down to nobody knew who the heck these people were. So
right.
there was a lot of how do we frame the truth in the best possible light, as my friend Bill Marsili in Hollywood always says, how do we frame that? And also I realized that we had several real stars in the company
Hmm.
that could go out into various different places and be thought leaders, scientists that everybody really thought was cool, who also had the ability to speak in public and not die. So, I was able to take the strengths of the people that they had and say, okay, so let me get it straight. You spoke at this conference and you got, $5 million worth of business. Why aren't you speaking at more conferences?
Right.
And the scientists would look at me and go, "Oh, you think that matters?" I'm like, yes, it's really good for us to get more business so we can keep paying you. Also, to be able to tie all these initiatives to people's understanding of how does it affect the bottom line, so they're not working in little silos. So that was interesting. And I did bring in a lot of different consultants on that I have because I do have a huge network and make some connections for them from people that I happen to know. But a lot of it was building up the salespeople, building up the leadership and building up the original owner and making sure that she was visible in the places she needed to be visible to be seen as a big player because they were so much smaller. It was that, Davida and Goliath,
Right.
as my friend John Lanier likes to say. That's no one knew they existed really.
Yeah.
And so we put them everywhere that people were looking. And the other thing is, I think you do this too. We kind of reversed back from what did their clients really, really want?
Ah,
Not what they should want. They were spending a lot of time selling what they thought their clients should want,
right.
and their clients didn't give a darn.
Right.
Turns out people only want what they want. If they knew that they should want other things, then they wouldn't have needed to hire these guys because
Right.
because they would be already be at that level. But people don't know what they should want and they don't care what they should want. They only know what they do want. Once you're in the door and you have your trusted advisor to them, then you can say, you should want these other things and here's why,
Right.
and they'll be open to it. So we had to reverse when they were telling people what they should want and when they were just meeting them where the client already was with what they do already want, and then backing into the other things that they knew were important for the
Yeah.
client.
No, that's absolutely spot on. And you and I have had several conversations about that. It's like, even
Yeah.
on branding, it's like people
Hmm.
need branding, but they don't think they need branding. So how can you
Yeah.
grab their attention with a want they currently have? And then, like you
Hmm.
said, how do you then talk them into the fact that, you know what? It's a bigger problem. It's a foundational problem. And we need to take a couple steps back and work on the brand before we solve this thing that you think is your immediate need. So,
Hmm. Hmm.
yeah, no, that's
Well, and
perfect.
you get to use that as a carrot too. If you
Hmm.
stay out of the weeds of this problem, fixing problem, and you keep on going with, okay, if we fix all those things for you, and we have in-house people, external people, all this stuff
Hmm.
to fix whatever those things are, what is it that you ultimately want? And then if you can keep them focused on, okay, well, if you want that, you can't have that unless we, as you said, go a few steps back and fix the branding issues because you can't get there in this vehicle. This
Right.
branding vehicle that you have won't get you where you need to go. And that's the exact conversation that we had to have. But I spend a lot, I think like you, I spend a lot of my time talking to clients about the fact that no one gets up in the morning and says, oh my gosh, I sure wish I knew more about your product or your
Right.
service.
Right.
But they do wake up in the morning saying, wow, I wish my business were growing this way or that way, or wished we had a solution to this technical thing or this innovation that they need.
Hmm.
And it's, people always pay the most for what they want the most and can justify the easiest.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if they can justify it really easily, but they don't really want it, it doesn't matter. If they really want it, but they can't justify it to everybody else, all the stakeholders, their CFO, their
Right,
spouse, their friends, the people that work for them, even their competitors being able to say, oh, this is a cool thing that we're doing.
right.
And so that becomes the thing is do your clients and customers get up in the morning and say, this is the most important thing that we want, not what you think they need? And is it something that's easy for them to justify? I
Right.
always say, what would they pay $1 million or 2 million or 50 million or $1 billion to be able to have? Because it would allow them something really spectacular. And
Yeah.
that's what you sell. You
Yeah.
tie whatever you do to that thing, and then everything takes off really, really quickly.
Yeah, and there's some magic to figuring out what that is. So, and that's what I love about
And
you is you
it's
are
good.
able to just hone in on this is what's going to get you in the door. This is what they're going to pay that $1 million to have. So that's great.
Right. Well, the two of us, that's the magic that we both possess is to be able
Yeah.
to see it from the outside. And I think it is hard to see where your company's magic is and
Oh,
what it is that
sure.
people want because we do automatically translate from, well, they said that they want this, but what they really mean is they need that. We should sell that. And we've all been guilty of it. And that's
Yeah.
why they need you. And that's why they need me too.
Right.
And
And
so
even
we're
looking internally at what their unique value is. It's one of these things
right.
where 99% of the time when I talk to my clients, they're like, oh, this is our brand. This is what our clients value us for. And then I go out and interview their clients, and it's like, no, this is what they value you for. So now, are you happy with
Oh.
that? If it is,
Mm.
then we need to start incorporating that into your messaging and your brand promise and getting that in there. Or if you're not happy with the perception of why they're hiring you, then let's start working on it. Where do we need to fix the messaging? Or more importantly, where do we need to fix the experience? Because they're not seeing what you think you're
Mm.
delivering. So,
Oh, that's
yeah.
fascinating.
But
How have you?
next question I have for you is building on again how you've transitioned and grown. Is when I first met you a number of years ago, it was, Sarah Victory. You were everything. You were the brand.
Yes.
Everyone wanted to work with you and they still do. And you have this fantastic, strong personality. But now, like you said, you've grown. You speak, you still do that, speak and write books. But then now you've got your consulting service. And now you actually have, like you said, this network of amazing people on your team who can come in and be the fractional CFO for a company you're working with, or be a VA or things like that. How have you worked on making your brand Sarah Victory to now
Hmm.
being a
The
larger
Victory
Victory
Company.
company?
The Victory
Mhm.
Company. Yeah. It is very interesting because some of it was very intentional, and I'm quite proud of that. And some of that was completely by accident. And I'm also proud of that too, because I was smart enough to know, okay, this is really helpful. So
Right.
there were two different things that happened. One was I got some great staff and headed up by our chief results officer, Leslie Orlaza.
Mhm.
And Leslie said, every single one of your clients needs assistance. And with huge talent war in the United States, they can't get enough staff. And she said, I used to source people in the Philippines. She's Filipina, for every possible thing. And she said, I'm really good at it. I love it. And she said, my philosophy is if you can find a person who's the answer to a prayer for the client, for the business owner or for the person that's going to be hiring this person, and also be an answer to a prayer for the person who would be going to work there. You have this magic thing where they just they just can go gangbusters. And I said, well, everybody is asking for that for us. And that is one of the holes that we have. We just can't fill. And I said, well, how would you go about that? And she said, well, this is what we would do. We could set it up this way. And she just basically became this intrapreneur within my company within about 10 seconds. So then she sources a few people for one of our biggest clients. So we give them a big discount because we haven't done it before. I knew Leslie would be great. I just didn't know how the whole system was going to work. And they flipped. They loved it. So they ended up getting dozens of people from us and telling everyone that they know. And then people started saying, I would love to have a Leslie. And now we have Leslie, we have a dozen people. So I wish I had a Leslie. I wish I had a Jamie. I wish I had your Eunice who does we have a creative department now that does all the creative stuff. And I was like, well, you can have our people. And that's when it evolved into you can have our people by the hour or by the project, or we can source you, we can bring your own people because people in the Philippines, they don't have as many opportunities in the US. The dollar happens to be quite high right now. So we're really lucky and fortunate. English is their primary work language, so that helps a whole lot. Some speak Spanish, so if you need dual languages, that can be really helpful. And I think a lot of us have concerns, it's like, how do I pay these people? Will I be able to trust these people? And then I realized, I've had people sit right next to me and work with me for several years that I realized I couldn't necessarily trust. Only one. But you either trust people or you don't, and you take time to do that. But it's just been interesting that all the things that I was concerned about hiring people, Leslie showed me how to find those people. And then I realized that all of my entrepreneur friends, all of my small to medium-sized business friends had the same thing. I would love to get some people from overseas. Of course, it costs a third to a quarter to get the amount of money to get somebody of equal qualifications. And that's a miraculous thing to get somebody with that level of experience. So I was like, okay, that's really neat. And then people just kept asking, how do I get a Leslie? How do I get a Jamie? How do I get a Jang who does all the bookkeeping for some of the different companies? How do I get a Eunice? And I was like, well, so then we offered them, okay, if you only need these people for 20 hours a month, we just take, rent our folks. They're awesome. But if you need a 40-hour person for $8, $10, $11 an hour or whatever, Leslie just did an amazing job of sourcing them. So that was really, really interesting to me. And then I do have a zillion friends, which is because I've been in the business forever. I have great business connections and a wonderful network that I adore,
You do.
mainly because Linda McCabe taught me how to really network and connect other people together. Shout out to the great, brilliant Linda McCabe.
Yes.
And so people would say, so-and-so is having a baby. We need a fractional CFO. And I would go, wow, I have three friends that are really good at that, because one gal in England who's brilliant. And we use her a whole lot for CEO, CFO, and COO. And it was like, oh, Kim Adele. Everybody would love, Kim Adele, Kim
I
Adele
know
Rabbit.
Kim. She's awesome.
Oh, isn't she? Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
she's
Brilliant.
amazing.
Yes.
Brilliant woman. Yeah, yeah, beautiful, wonderful human being. And so I would be like, oh, she's almost always what people are looking for. So I would say, well, have you met? And so what happened after a while was I would say, oh, you need your website done? Oh, okay. And I would send them to one of the people that I then eventually hired internally. Like we have this guy, Hames, who does amazing websites under Eunice's department. And he's incredible, but I kept sending them to the people. And then I would say, then the client would ask me 4,000 questions about how to work with Hames. And finally, I just realized, would it be better if you just paid us? I can hire him full time. You could just pay us. We could of course, the
Right.
great project manager, Leslie, could oversee it. And then I don't have to keep going back and forth and back. It was just mainly time management for me
Right.
and annoyance factor of having to do that. So then we had these external people. We've got about 14 of them, everything from HR to CEO, CFO, EIO, everything you can imagine.
Mhm.
But then, so we had internal people for websites and all this creative stuff, or also for practical stuff, or, people when they needed something once or when they needed something part-time, we had internal people. And if they wanted full-time, we could also source them. Again, all entrepreneurial things that were happening within my company that I just encouraged because I thought these people are brilliant. And for me to go out and find people in the Philippines, I don't know what school is good. I don't know, geez, they don't get the best education at that company. I have no way of knowing. Whereas somebody like Leslie will know, oh yeah, I went to school with their cousin. I found out one of the people we sourced 2 weeks ago, she said, oh yeah, her family lives 4 houses down from my house. So it's a small enough
Right.
area
Right.
where she knows the behind the scenes story. So that's been really, really helpful. So it just expanded. And all of a sudden it dawned on me, oh, good Lord, I've got to become a leader. And that was the most terrifying moment of my life because, and people, one of my my girlfriend Lee's, that we've been from, best buddies since college. She said, you speak to 10,000 people at a time. I think you're already a leader. And I'm like, yeah, but this is different.
Right.
I said, I need to actually be the leader that these people deserve because they're awesome.
Right.
I don't think I was ever more scared. I hope they don't listen to this, my team. But,
Yes.
so I had to really, really work on not just being a great consultant, which I hope and think I am, or a terrific speaker, pretty good at that.
Yep.
Writing the occasional book. I also had to learn how to set the future, and then, so they started calling me the chief visionary officer. And I realized, oh my gosh, that's what I've become,
Right.
is that person that is nurturing all that talent within my company, and also the architect of people's dreams for their company,
Right.
that I could come in as the architect and let all these people do the work all in one place, so that people aren't having to hunt, peck, and find the solutions to all these different things. So it just exploded. And yeah, it's been a real privilege to work with the people that I have on my team. And that's been pretty extraordinary.
Yeah.
Caitlin Allen originally found Leslie. She worked as a wonderful consultant, and so I have her to thank for a lot of this too.
Oh, that's great. I've interacted with Leslie, and yes, she is amazing. So all of
Mhm.
that's great. But
Yeah.
okay, well,
Mhm.
I have one more question for you here. A keynote speech that you have and a slogan that's really very highly, associated with you and your brand is do something brave every day, right? So
Mhm.
where does that come from? Because I think it really does differentiate you as a speaker. So tell us the story about where that came from.
Well, that's a absolutely wonderful question, Sue. Thank you for asking. I love sharing where that came from. This is an experience that happened to me that shaped my life and my future forever.
Hmm.
I was living in California at the time. I live in Chicago now, but a bunch of years ago, I met Steve, the cute husband, in
Yes.
California. So before that, I went to this party, and I'm like wearing the off-the-shoulder dress and trying to look all cute. And it was a wonderful party. And it ends really late. It's like 3 o'clock in the morning. And I start driving home, and I'm going down. I don't know if you've ever been down Pacific Coast Highway. It's the
Hmm.
road that goes along the coast.
Right.
And I've got my windows open. I'm singing badly, and I've got the feel of the mist on my face. And well, and the salt and all that. And I just had the best time. It's when you've been to those parties where it's like the best party you've ever been to. It was the best party ever. And so I think, wow, what a privilege that I got to go and experience this. And the food was amazing, all that. So I'm on my way home feeling all pretty. And I'm driving along, and I get up to my house and park in the driveway rather than the garage, because it's Southern California and it's 72 degrees and sunny every day of the year.
Hmm.
And so I go to turn off the car, pull up the windows. And at the same moment as I go to do that, I look up and I see this guy coming out of the bushes so fast. And he is like right up against my window. And all I can see is his hands in his pocket, like he's got a gun. And he says, "Excuse me, ma'am, but I need you to take me to Anaheim." And my first thought was not, I'm going to die. Where the heck is Anaheim from here? My first thought was, he called me ma'am.
Hmm.
He called me ma'am. And then I thought, well, first of all, I'm not a ma'am. I'm way too young for that. And no one likes to be called ma'am. And I thought, okay, maybe now's not to do. The other thing I thought was, this is like a really polite carjacker. Like something's
Yeah.
going on here, but I couldn't I was just too terrified to put any of the pieces together.
Together.
So all of a sudden, in 4 seconds, I just froze. I didn't do anything you think you're supposed to do, honk, drive away, scream. I don't know what it was, but I didn't do any of that. And within the 4 seconds that I was sitting there debating what is going on here and why is he so polite and all that, he's already around the side of the car, and he's opened up, the windows are open. So he's opened up the door and he's sitting next to me. And I haven't, I'm too terrified to look at the guy. And because he seems big, and he's got a gun. And so I think, all right, well, I better figure out how to get to Anaheim. So I turn on the car and I start driving and driving and driving. And I know kind of the direction I'm going. And I figure he'll tell me where I'm going once I get to that part of the state.
Yeah.
And so driving along, and then all of a sudden I'm trying to, I'm starting to I'm like having heart palpitations and stuff. And I think, okay, breathe, breathe, breathe. And then I think, I got to look at this guy. What's going on? And so I look over and just take a quick glance, right? And I look over, and this guy's got his hands out of his pocket. So there's clearly no gun. And I realize like he's got tears streaming down his face. And I also realize that he cannot be more than like 15
Mm.
years old. 15. And so I look over at him and I say, "Are you okay?" Because I couldn't help myself. That's like the most codependent statement ever. I just realized. But anyway, so I looked at, but I was
Yeah.
like, "Are you okay?" And he
Right.
says, my life is just, I won't even say expletive, but my life is the worst, right? And I was like, why? What is going on? And he tells me the saddest story I think I've ever heard in my life. He was in and out of foster care. His parents were drug dealers and had big problems with drugs, sadly. A lot of folks do.
Yeah.
And but he got to go home that from being in a group home that day, and it was a Saturday, and he walked into the living room when they dropped him off, and he realized that in the living room was a meth lab
Mm,
in the middle of his house. And so then there was an FBI raid, as one does have happen to them. He
yeah.
has an FBI raid come into his home that he hasn't been in months. And they take his parents away and they say, run. So he panics and runs. And he slips out of a bathroom window and literally physically runs for miles and miles and miles until he sees in the middle of the night, he sees
You.
this little woman full up with a lot of red hair, and he, comes out of the shadows, and he thinks to himself, I could just wait and like take her keys and drive the car, but I'm 15 and don't know how to drive yet. So his logic was, I'll just carjack her and get her to drive. A discussion we had about whether or not that was the best choice came later.
Right.
So I said, okay. I said, that is horrible. I didn't have an easy childhood either, and a lot of people are surprised by that. So I can identify with some of what you are talking about. And he went,
Hmm.
but you drive a nice car, but you're so put together and you're so, and I was like, well, you will be too someday. You will
Yeah.
be too someday. But you have to figure out what you want because it doesn't sound like your parents are in a place where they're making choices that allow them to really be there for you.
Right.
And so what is it that you would want from your life? If we could do magic and sprinkle fairy dust over your head. I basically just turned into like my typical consultant, only with a 15-year-old about his life.
Right.
And he said, I'd work on old motorcycles. I'd make them cherry. I'm like, cherry? Is that a fruit? And he's like, no, no, that means good. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
thank you. I'm an old person. You have to help me.
Yeah.
And he says, yeah, no, I'd make them cherry. I was like, well, that sounds great. How could you get to moving towards that? He goes, there's a special school where you can learn to do that. Really? He goes, yeah, I could qualify for that special school. I said, what would you have to do? He goes, well, the first step would go, he goes, there's this social worker. She likes me. I have to get special housing and I'd have to get this and this. And I was like, okay, 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 that sounds good. Where would you start? He goes, well, I'd call her on Monday. I said, well, why don't you do that then? So meanwhile, we're pulling up into, there's a nice part of Anaheim. And sadly, at the time, there was a not so nice part of Anaheim. And we were in the, let's just say, less fancy part of Anaheim.
Yeah.
But he happened to know a couple of buddies that lived there and he was like trying to figure this out. So we pull up into this seedy neighborhood. And he says, I'm going to call her on Monday. I said, well, I think you should. I think that's great. And I noticed as he's conversing with me that he steals my card on the console between us, slips it in his pocket. I didn't say anything. And he said, you know what? He said, I'm 15. I think you're the first person who's ever believed in me. And I just said, wow, I'm so honored. I'm
Yeah.
so honored. I do believe in you. And his name was Ricky, right? I said, Ricky, I think you can do anything. You're so smart. You're going to do really, really well. And I want to hear all about it. But I do believe in you. And I said, I
Mhm.
think one of the most powerful forces on earth is to have someone that believes in you. And I do. I believe in you in the way that people have believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. You
Yeah.
deserve that too. And so he said, okay. He goes, well, I'm going to watch you while you drive away. This isn't a very good neighborhood. I said, well, I'm going to watch you while you walk up there because this isn't, and his friends are waving, so I think he's pretty safe. And I drive away. So a few weeks later, I am going through the airport in Cincinnati and I'm on my headset talking to my assistant, Pamela, at the time, a wonderful woman. And she says, we got this call from this guy. He sounds really young. And I went, what?
Hmm.
I wasn't putting it together. And she
Yeah.
says, no, he sounds really young. I said, well, what did he say? Well, he said he's got big news. He wants you to know he got into a special school, special housing. He's working on old cars and old motorcycles and making them. I don't know if I have this right, but he says cherry. I was like, yes, I know what that is
I
because I
know
am
who
so
you're
super.
talking
I
about.
am I am so super cool. I get it. And I said, well, what else did he say? He said that he's discovered the secret of life. I said, what's the secret of life? He says the secret of life is you do something brave every day. You just do something brave every day.
Yeah.
And I thought I could give up speaking and let this guy talk for me. That is the smartest thing I've ever heard. That is the secret of life.
Yeah.
whatever it is that you need to do, not doing stupid, crazy thing like standing in front of a train or anything, but doing something brave every day. And that is, I think, the secret of the success that I've had over these years of basically never give up and do something brave every day, something that really matters, something that will really affect your future
Yeah.
or in the future of your business or the future of your life. So he did not give her his phone number, something that she tried, bless her heart.
Yeah.
And I've never heard back from him, but I figure if I tell the story enough times, maybe Ricky will
Maybe he'll hear it. Yeah.
find me. And it did lead to when I met the cute husband, Steve, we did end up fostering the 3 kids that we still have because of the influence that he had on me. But he changed my life
Lovely.
forever. And
Yeah.
I do think that is the secret of life. I think he's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lovely. That is a great
Thank you.
story. Great, great story.
Thank you.
So, well, I'm going to go ahead and end it on that because it's so powerful. And
Thank you
obviously,
for having
everyone
me
has
on.
now seen the magic of your storytelling and
Thank you.
insights on branding, life, and growing your business. So, I appreciate you taking the time to spend with me today here on the show. And I would just like to say, if people want to hear more from you on
Mhm.
speaking or consulting or helping them become a thought leader, how can they find you?
Mhm. We have thevictorycompany.coms all spelled out, thevictorycompany.com. You can get me at me personally, Sarah, at thevictorycompany.com. My team will probably get back to you, but that's how you can reach me. You can also get at me at Sarah Victory on LinkedIn, Sarah Victory also on Facebook. And you can go to our show, The Inspired Victory Show, our podcast on YouTube or all the podcast platforms. But thank you so much for having me on. You know, I think you're brilliant, and it really is a privilege
Well,
to be
thank you.
asked and get to talk about these things with somebody who's a real pro. So thank you so
Well,
much for
thank you,
having me
Sarah.
on.
I appreciate that.
It's an
You're
honor.
a great friend and a great inspiration. So thank you for being
So
on the
are
show.
you.
And for
So
everybody
are you.
else, thank you for listening. I hope you've been inspired to ignite your growth by leveraging your brand. Thank you.